In the heart of the East Glade, a vast expanse of agricultural fields and swamps outside Homestead, Florida, a peculiar encounter occurred on a cold February afternoon in 1985. The region, also known as the Double Canals, was characterised by its flat landscape, a patchwork of corn and potato fields interspersed with willows, buttonwoods, scrub oaks, sawgrass and cattail sloughs. A network of drainage ditches, affectionately called jumpers by the locals due to their narrow width, crisscrossed the area, dividing it into large plots of fields and swamp. Affectionately called jumpers by the locals due to their narrow width, crisscrossed the area, dividing it into large plots of fields and swamp. James Douglas and his friend Brian Holloway had chosen this remote location for an afternoon of fishing, taking advantage of the jumpers that bordered the edge where the farms yielded to the swamp. The temperature, unusually cold for subtropical Florida, hovered in the mid-50s Fahrenheit, with expectations of dropping to the low 40s come nightfall. As the sun began its slow descent, casting long shadows across the landscape, James noticed a figure approaching from the depths of the swamp about 3/4 of a mile down the road they were fishing on. At first, James paid little attention to the distant figure, assuming it to be just another person out for a stroll in the wilderness. However, as time passed and the figure drew closer, it became apparent that something was not quite right about it. The figure, now discernible as a woman, moved at an unusually slow pace, her gait suggesting a sense of disorientation or fatigue. James, now alone near his car as Brian had wandered around a corner, kept a watchful eye on the approaching woman while continuing to fish. As the woman drew nearer, her appearance became more distinct, revealing a sight that was both peculiar and unsettling. She was barefoot, wearing only a long pink t-shirt with a teddy bear design of the kind you might find on children's pyjamas. Despite her dishevelled appearance, with water-stained t-shirt and mouse-brown hair that appeared to have been wet earlier in the day and left unbrushed, her feet were surprisingly clean, and her skin, although slightly pale, was free of blemishes. She seemed to be in relatively good health, displaying no overt signs of distress or concern about her unusual circumstances. Upon reaching James, she had a simple request, asking for a cigarette. When he told her that he had none to offer, she merely stared at him blankly, her expression devoid of emotion. Perplexed by her presence in such a remote location, James inquired about her reasons for being there. In a matter-of-fact tone, she replied, "I've been swimming with the alligators." This cryptic response only deepened the mystery surrounding her, prompting James to probe further, asking who had left her in this desolate place. She simply stated, "They left me here," offering no additional details or context. James, now growing increasingly concerned for the woman's well-being, offered her a ride back to town once he and Brian had finished fishing. He also mentioned that he would provide her with a small sum of money and drop her off at a convenience store, ensuring her safety and comfort. She simply responded, "I'll wait over there," proceeding to walk about 50 feet in front of James' car, where she squatted down in the road, pulling her shirt over her knees and settling into an upright fetal position. The strange situation left James feeling uneasy, prompting him to seek out Brian and discuss their next course of action. Out of earshot of the mysterious woman, the two friends debated the best way to handle the predicament, considering the possibility that she might be a lost or troubled individual in need of assistance. Brian, however, raised the concern that she could be attempting to lure them into a dangerous situation, possibly setting them up to be robbed. James, however, dismissed this notion, confident that she would have been deterred by his rather large and conspicuous pistol worn around his waist. As the time came to leave, the woman climbed into the back of James' 1972 four-door Chevelle, and the three set off back towards town. During the ride, Brian posed similar questions to the woman, receiving the same cryptic responses about swimming with alligators and the unnamed they who had left her out there. She also mentioned that she no longer had any friends in town, stating that they were all gone. The atmosphere in the car grew heavy with an unsettling silence as they continued their journey. Approximately half a mile from the outskirts of town, the woman suddenly exclaimed, "I forgot my shoes." James, attempting to reassure her, suggested that she could easily obtain new shoes once they reached their destination. However, the woman was insistent, declaring that she must have her high heels. James, unwilling to argue with what he perceived to be an irrational request, pulled the car to a stop and allowed her to exit the vehicle. As the woman stepped out of the car through the rear passenger door, Brian turned to James with an unnerved expression and said, "She's a ghost." James, initially dismissive of his friend's claim, reassured him that she was just troubled. Brian, however, reiterated his fear, insisting that she was, in fact, a spirit. As James began to once again shrug off the notion, he glanced in the rearview mirror, only to find that the woman had vanished without a trace. Stunned by her sudden disappearance, James and Brian turned around, scanning the surrounding area for any sign of her. The road they had been travelling on was a broad, 50-foot wide stretch of white rock, flanked on either side by flat, freshly planted farm fields. Not a single bush or tree was in sight, the only feature the jumpers that ran alongside the road. Despite the open landscape, there was no trace of the woman, as if she had simply vanished into thin air. Brian, now convinced of the woman's supernatural nature, placed his hand on the seat where she had been sitting for the past 20 minutes. To his astonishment, the seat was as cold as ice, a stark contrast to the warmth that should have lingered from her presence. James, still grappling with the baffling events, placed his own hand on the seat, confirming the unnatural chill that emanated from it. Brian then posed a question that sent a shiver down James' spine. "Did you notice that she didn't smell like anything?" Upon reflection, James realised that, indeed, the woman had been curiously devoid of any scent, a perplexing observation considering she claimed to have spent the day in the swamp, a claim seemingly confirmed by her lank hair and water-stained t-shirt. In the days and weeks that followed, James shared his extraordinary experience with only a select few, including his wife, Amelia. The encounter had a profound impact on him, raising questions about the nature of reality and the existence of the supernatural, which previously he had never entertained. It wasn't until a fateful afternoon, during a casual conversation with his father, Norman Douglas, that the true depth of the mystery was revealed. As James recounted the strange tale to his father, Norman's expression grew solemn, his eyes filled with a mixture of recognition and disbelief. With a voice heavy with emotion, Norman confessed that he too had encountered the same woman 50 years prior in the very same area. The details of his father's encounter were strikingly similar, down to the woman's initial request for a cigarette. However, there was one significant difference. In Norman's encounter, the woman had been completely naked, save for a pair of high-heeled shoes. Norman, an elder in the church and a man of unwavering faith, had never spoken of his own brush with the supernatural, choosing to keep the experience locked away. The revelation that both father and son had been visited by the same mysterious figure, decades apart, sent shockwaves through James's mind. The implications were staggering, not only reinforcing the suggestion that the woman was not of this world, but revealing that she was a spirit who had haunted the East Glade for generations. As James grappled with the enormity of this revelation, he found himself consumed by a desire to unravel the mystery surrounding the ghostly woman. He pored over local histories and folklore, searching for any mention of a similar apparition, as well as reports of violent crimes or tragedies that might have given rise to her restless spirit. Yet despite his tireless efforts, no clear answers emerged, leaving him with only more questions. In the years that followed, James would often find himself drawn back to the East Glade, his thoughts consumed by the memory of that fateful February afternoon. He would stand at the edge of the swamp, gazing out over the endless expanse of sawgrass and cattails, wondering if the woman still wandered those lonely roads, seeking solace or redemption for some long-forgotten transgression. Nevertheless, he found a strange comfort in the knowledge that both he and his father had been chosen, for reasons unknown, to bear witness to the same spectral mystery. He often wondered if his paternal lineage had been linked to the woman in some way, all those generations ago, whether through love, violence, or tragedy. Almost 40 years later, James has come to realise that perhaps some mysteries are better left unsolved. Although he has never crossed paths with the supernatural since his encounter with the ghostly woman, the incident forever altered his perception of the world, opening his eyes to the possibility of greater truths outside the current limits of human understanding.